Beneath the frozen Yukon sky, disaster strikes with no warning. A deafening crack tears through the night, and the walls of Parker Schnabel's cut explode outward, sending a tidal wave of ice and gravel crashing into the pit. Machinery vanishes under the cascade, headlights flicker in choking clouds of dust, and men scramble for their lives. In the chaos, Parker makes a desperate leap from the collapsing edge. Seconds later, the ground where he stood plunges into darkness. Cameras catch the madness as dozers are swallowed whole, sluice lines crushed, and crew members pull each other out of the sliding muck. For a heartbeat, silence settles. Then a murmur ripples through the shaken camp. Something glitters beneath the rubble. What should have been the end of the season suddenly looks like the beginning of something far bigger. Accidents don't usually reveal fortune, unless the earth itself is tearing open a secret. By floodlight, the crew digs into the wreckage and stumbles on the unthinkable. This isn't ordinary Yukon pay dirt. Parker wipes the gravel clean with his gloves, and heavy gold chunks, thick and jagged, glisten in the fractured permafrost. These aren't flakes. They're boulders of wealth, the kind miners dream of but never see. His geologist runs frantic assays, struggling to steady his voice as the numbers roll out. Richness levels dozens of times higher than anything recorded on the claim. Old survey maps show no sign of such a deposit. It's as if the collapse ripped into a hidden vault sealed off for centuries. A vault no one even knew was there. And if you want to follow Parker through every twist of this high-stakes discovery, where fortunes rise and lives hang by a thread, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe right now, because what happens next is the kind of Yukon story you won't want to miss. Some of the crew whisper this gold was waiting to be found, fated to reveal itself. Others mutter that it was hidden for a reason, that striking it might have awakened something better, left untouched. Beneath the floodlights, the camp stands divided, staring into a glittering abyss that seems less like a discovery and more like a warning. Days of frantic test runs follow, machines roaring through the frozen muck as Parker tries to grasp the scale of what lies before him. When the tallies come back, the weight of it nearly knocks him off his feet. The newly exposed zone could hold an astronomical $45 million in gold. One strike, just one, dwarfing even his greatest cleanups, rewriting his entire career in a single discovery. The crew cheers, some already counting their share of the fortune. But Parker's face stays grim. He can't shake the memory of the collapse, the seconds when his life nearly ended. "What's the price of $45 million if you don't live to see it?" he mutters, half to himself. And already, word is leaking beyond the camp. Rival miners whisper of Parker's motherlode, and in the Yukon, gold like this doesn't just attract fortune, it attracts enemies. The whispers gnaw at him, mixing with the image of walls buckling and ground-swallowing machines whole. Parker needs answers, not numbers. Something to explain why the strike feels less like luck and more like a warning. So he leaves camp behind and drifts into Dawson City, seeking the voices of men who've seen more seasons than he has. In a dimly lit bar, the air thick with smoke and old timber creaking underfoot, veterans lean across the table, their voices low, their whiskey glasses trembling in calloused hands. They tell him stories every miner in the Yukon has heard, but few repeat out loud. The tale of a lost lode that swallowed entire crews a century ago. According to the old-timers, it wasn't just a strike, it was a curse. Gold so rich men lost their senses, digging until the ground itself betrayed them. They describe walls collapsing without warning, frozen gravel flowing like water, and deaths that came swift and merciless. Parker listens, uneasy, because every detail matches the collapse he just survived. The gold-rich gravel, the sudden cave-in, the unnatural destruction. Later, back at camp, One of his crew digs up brittle newspaper clippings from an archive in town. The headlines scream warnings from another era. Disaster strikes camp in Klondike Gulch. Miners lost to Earth's fury. Cursed strike swallows dreams and men alike. The articles describe scenes eerily familiar. Lanterns extinguished in clouds of dust. Men buried alive while reaching for shimmering veins. Entire operations abandoned in fear. To the old miners, the land wasn't just dangerous. It was alive, rebelling against those who sought to strip it bare. Parker, normally the skeptic who dismisses superstition as distraction, finds himself staring at the fresh gold in his hands with a gnawing unease. Could this really be the same lost lode, buried and waiting? Or are the stories just tales woven to scare greenhorns? The more he thinks about the collapse, the more it feels like he isn't the first man to stand at this crossroads. The Yukon whispers, its frozen winds carrying echoes of men who dug too deep. For the first time in his career, Parker wonders if he isn't just mining gold. He's fighting history itself, a legacy of greed and death repeating in his cut. At night, sleep doesn't come. He replays the moment over and over, the groan of the earth before it broke, the thunderous roar as permafrost shattered, the blinding white haze of dust and ice choking the air. He remembers the sudden lurch of the ground beneath his boots, how the world seemed to drop away in a heartbeat. If he'd hesitated 1 second longer, he knows he would have been gone. When he shuts his eyes, he still sees the wall collapsing, feels the vibration underfoot, hears the distant screams of his crew echoing off metal and stone. Around camp, men speak in hushed tones, voices still raw from the chaos. One worker recalls his excavator tipping sideways into the void, metal screeching as he leapt from the cab just in time. Another describes being yanked from the sliding muck by 2 crewmates, his boots torn from his feet as the gravel tried to drag him under. Each story reinforces how thin the line between survival and tragedy truly was. For many, no payday is worth the thought of being buried alive in permafrost. The mood shifts. What once was a camp driven by ambition now feels haunted. Every man looking at the ground as though it could open beneath him at any second. Parker doesn't hide his own fear. In an uncharacteristic moment on camera, his voice cracks as he admits, "This was the scariest moment of my life. I saw the end of it all, right there." His hands shake slightly as he rubs the dirt from his jacket. For a man who has faced equipment, breakdowns, brutal weather, and crushing debt, this collapse was different. This was personal. He had felt death brush past him. And yet, when he looks at the veins of gold glimmering in the floodlights, something else stirs. He sees not just risk, but destiny. The gold is there for the taking, but it demands something in return. Survival, sacrifice, obsession. It's a bargain every miner knows, but few admit. Parker realizes he may already be paying the price. The discovery electrifies the crew, but not in the way Parker hoped. Half of them are wide-eyed, dreaming of fortunes that could change their lives forever. They talk about new trucks, homes for their families, the chance to never work another brutal Yukon season again. For them, this is the payday they've chased through years of frostbite and exhaustion. The other half, though, are uneasy, muttering that no treasure is worth digging in ground that's already tried to kill them. They've seen too many near deaths, felt the ground buck beneath their machines, and they can't shake the thought that the next collapse won't spare anyone. Tension builds like storm clouds over camp. Heated arguments flare in the mess hall, spoons clattering against metal trays as men shout about whether they should push forward or pack up before the earth swallows them whole. Parker listens to both sides but remains unyielding. For him, walking away isn't an option. He spent his life chasing the big strike, and here it is, practically thrown into his lap. Fate doesn't offer second chances. He stands before the crew, voice steady but eyes burning, and says, "We came here for gold. We found it. I'm not leaving it behind." The words divide the camp even deeper. Some rally to him instantly, loyal to a fault, willing to risk everything because they believe in Parker and in the fortune shining in the gravel. Others sit in silence, staring at their plates, unwilling to openly challenge him, but unwilling to dig another shovelful either. The Yukon air grows heavy with mistrust, every decision sharpening the line between greed and survival. Machines sit idle longer than usual, not from breakdowns, but from hesitation. Men start watching each other more closely than the sluices. The collapse didn't just split the ground, it split the camp itself. For Parker, the choice has already been made. He knows the risks, he knows the dangers, and he knows the history. But he also knows the truth. Miners don't walk away from $45 million in gold. Even if the ground threatens to consume him, even if the stories of the lost lode prove true, Parker will dig. He will pull every ounce from the cursed earth, no matter the cost. The Yukon doesn't forgive hesitation, and he refuses to be another name in a forgotten headline. In his mind, the gold belongs to those willing to bleed for it, and he's ready to claim it. But gold this rich doesn't stay in the shadows for long. Resolve has its price, and Parker's decision to keep digging sends a ripple through the frozen valleys. The land may be cursed, but it's not the only thing watching him. Strange vehicles appear near the edges of Parker's claim, headlights vanishing into the trees before anyone can get a clear look. At dawn, fresh tire tracks crisscross the snow in places they shouldn't be, evidence that someone's been prowling too close during the night. The crew notices boot prints near the boundary markers, pressed deep into the frost, as though someone was scouting in the dark. Whispers spread fast. Rivals are circling. In the Yukon, fortune this size doesn't stay secret for long. Rumors fly through Dawson's saloons. Rival miners planning to test Parker's ground. Claim jumpers eager to steal samples, and darker suggestions that sabotage could wipe him out before he cashes in. Old grudges resurface like ghosts. Parker has never been popular among the older outfits. His youth, his relentless drive, his success, it all painted a target on his back. Now, with a $45 million discovery, the stakes are no longer about pride or jealousy. They're lethal. Men have killed for less. In response, the camp transforms overnight. Guards are posted at the perimeter, headlights sweep the cut after midnight, and new cameras blink from poles around the wash plants. Parker himself takes to patrolling the claim with a flashlight and rifle, stalking the frozen ridges like a soldier on hostile ground. Diesel engines rumble through the night, not for mining, but to mask the sounds of footsteps, because paranoia sets in. The sense that eyes are always watching. Floodlights cast long shadows across the icy pit, the camp lit up like a fortress in the wilderness. The Yukon feels less like a mining ground and more like a frontier battleground. And everyone knows what happens on a frontier. Someone gets bold enough to cross the line. As the dust from the collapse settles and the initial surveys roll in, Parker's geologists study the fractured walls. The patterns don't look natural. Unusual cracks zigzag through the permafrost, as if someone deliberately weakened the walls. The striations don't match normal thaw cycles, and pockets of loosened gravel seem deliberately exposed. One geologist, hesitant at first, finally says aloud what everyone is thinking. "This doesn't look right, it looks tampered with." The words hang heavy in the tent. If the collapse wasn't nature's work, then it was sabotage. Parker's mind races back to arguments from weeks earlier. Heated disputes with rivals over boundary lines, sharp words exchanged at fuel depots, veiled threats muttered over beers in crowded Dawson bars. He remembers one miner slamming his fist into a table and hissing, "You won't keep that ground forever, kid." At the time, Parker dismissed it as drunken talk. Now, standing over a pit that nearly buried him alive, the memory feels different. Every glance into the collapse zone gnaws at him. Was it the weight of permafrost and time that broke the walls? Or did someone dig unseen tunnels, salt the earth with instability, and wait for the right moment to watch him fall? The thought festers. Parker keeps his suspicions mostly to himself, not wanting to spook the entire camp further, but paranoia runs deep. Every stranger in town feels like a spy. Every noise in the dark sounds like footsteps. The Yukon has always been dangerous, but now it feels actively hostile, as though the land and his rivals have joined forces to bury him. Then the ground gives up more than gold. While clearing away debris near the collapse site, Parker's men uncover strange shapes buried beneath the muck. At first, they think it's just driftwood dragged down by the slide. But as the frozen dirt is chipped away, old timbers emerge, cut square, stacked with purpose. These aren't natural formations. They're the remnants of shafts, long collapsed, dug by miners, long forgotten. The further they dig, the more relics surface: rusted pickaxes, shattered shovels, and crushed lanterns sealed in ice. The discovery stops the camp cold. These tools don't belong to Parker or his crew. They belong to men who once stood in the same pit, chasing the same glittering fortune. Men who, like Parker, believed they'd found the strike of a lifetime. The realization spreads like fire through the ranks. This isn't a new discovery. This is the same cursed lode others tried and failed to exploit. Stories Parker once dismissed as folklore suddenly feel real. The lost expeditions, the vanished miners whose names survive only in whiskey-soaked tales, weren't myths. They were real men, digging in the same frozen earth, their dreams buried with them. Some of the crew stare into the pit, as if expecting bones to rise out of the muck. Others cross themselves silently, convinced they're working ground that's already taken lives. The weight of history presses down on Parker harder than the permafrost above his head. He isn't blazing new trails. He's retracing old footsteps, gambling his future on a vein that may have already written its ending long before he arrived. As he looks across the pit, lanterns from a century ago feel almost visible, their faint glow flickering against the icy walls. It's a reminder that gold doesn't just forge fortunes, it buries men, swallows legacies, and leaves behind ghosts. The Yukon wind howls across the cut, carrying snow and whispers in equal measure. Parker stands at the edge of the collapse, the glitter of fortune gleaming back at him from the shadows. He isn't the first man to gamble everything on this cursed vein, and deep down, he knows he won't be the last. And yet, unlike the men who came before, Parker refuses to see ghosts as warnings. He sees them as markers, proof that the vein is real, proof that it can be taken if he dares. The gamble began the moment Parker decided to push forward, ignoring the fracture lines that still webbed the pit floor like scars left by the collapse. Every choice from here on was a razor's edge. The crew begged him to think twice, reminding him of the roar of gravel that almost swallowed them whole, of how one wrong vibration from the machines could send the walls crumbling again. But Parker's eyes were locked on the pay streak, veins of gold-rich gravel glinting through the muck. It was unlike anything he had seen in Alaska or the Klondike. This wasn't just gold, it was destiny, and he couldn't walk away. The Yukon had dangled its greatest prize in front of him, and Parker Schnabel wasn't the type to blink. That obsession bled into every hour. He stopped sleeping properly, started pacing the cut at night with a flashlight in hand, staring at the earth as though it might whisper its secrets if he only looked hard enough. Every bucket of dirt became a gamble of greed. Millions in potential gold weighed against the risk of machines, men, and his own life buried under shifting permafrost. His younger self would have called it reckless. Now, with fortune staring him in the face, he called it necessary. Crew warnings sounded like echoes of those miners from a century ago who spoke of the cursed load. Legends of greed consuming men alive didn't feel so distant anymore. They lived in every decision Parker made. The Yukon was reminding him of its old rule. It doesn't care who you are. It will take as much as it gives. So he doubled down. Floodlights blazed against the endless Yukon night as Parker launched a campaign of extraction that felt more like war than mining. Excavators chewed at the frozen muck 24 hours a day. Dozers pushed loads onto conveyors, and the wash plants thundered without pause. Diesel fumes hung thick in the air, a constant haze of sacrifice feeding the machines that in turn fed the dream. Fuel bills soared, equipment cracked under the strain, but every cleanup pan turned doubt into hunger again. Gold poured across the sluice mats in a steady, glittering flow, nuggets stacking like poker chips at a table only the Yukon could host. The crew worked themselves into ghosts, eyes red, backs bent, hands blistered, but none of them quit because the numbers rolling out of each cleanup were unlike anything they had imagined. Tray after tray, bin after bin, Parker's gold hoard swelled, enough to make seasoned miners weep or swear in disbelief. Even the skeptics who swore no fortune was worth their lives found themselves pushing harder, unable to turn their backs on what they were part of. Every man on site knew he was standing in the middle of a story that would echo across the Yukon for decades, but the ground never forgot. Groans rose again from the walls of the pit, deep rumbles that cut through the roar of diesel engines. Each sound was a reminder that the mine itself had a voice, and it was warning them. Gravel shifted, timbers cracked, machines trembled on their tracks. Parker heard it, knew what it meant, but he pressed on. The Yukon had set the terms: either take everything before the earth swallowed it again, or leave history's richest pay streak buried forever. When the dust finally settled, the scales told the truth. The tally was staggering: over $45 million in raw gold cleaned, weighed, and locked into secure bins. It was enough to etch Parker's name into the bedrock of Yukon history, to put his claim alongside the greatest legends of the Klondike. For the mining world, it was proof that Parker Schnabel was no longer chasing the shadows of his mentors or rivals. He had carved out a legacy that was entirely his own. Yet the victory came with a silence that no fortune could drown. The pit lay scarred, black walls looming like a wound in the earth. Men avoided looking into it too long, as if afraid the darkness might stare back. The crew was split. Some celebrated, others packed bags in quiet haste, unwilling to tempt the land further. Parker himself couldn't shake the weight pressing on his chest. He remembered the whispers in Dawson City bars, the clippings of miners swallowed whole, the old tale of the cursed load, where no man left unscarred. Standing at the edge of the cut, Parker held his fortune in his hands but felt the Yukon's eyes on his back. History said no one who struck this load ever truly kept it. The gold glittered with a brilliance that felt almost mocking, as if reminding him that every ounce was paid for in blood, fear, and the land's silent fury. He had beaten collapse, rivals, exhaustion, and perhaps sabotage. But had he really won? Or had he awakened something older than his own ambition? Something that would follow him long after the last nugget was sold? The wind howled through the empty machinery, carrying with it the ghosts of the past. Parker Schnabel had 45 million reasons to celebrate, but as he stared across the fractured Yukon night, he couldn't tell if he had taken a fortune or a curse that would never let him go. And if you've been holding your breath through Parker's brush with death and the fortune that followed, then you already know this story is far from over. The Yukon still has secrets buried deeper than any machine can reach, and legends don't die quietly. If you want to see where Parker's gamble leads next, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next chapter in this saga of gold, greed, and survival.